leaders. I met Duke once in my life to look at him and say, I don't know if I can support you. When, in 1988, I was put on the Populist Party slate as vice president before they chose a president. And the only reason I agreed to be their vice presidential candidate is because they told me Jim Traficant, the sitting congressman from Cincinnati, was going to be their presidential representative, and I like Jim Traficant. And I talked to him, and we agreed. He said, Bo, I'd like to have you if you're willing. And I said, I respect what you're doing, and I'll support you. But then all of a sudden, Jim Traficant was rejected by a delegation about this size, and David Duke was put in substitute. I didn't know Duke except that he was a member of the Ku Klux Klan at one time, and I had, in my military suit, been taught that if you were hiding behind a sheet, you were probably communist infiltrated, and you were doing things that were dirty as far as the government's concerned. So I had never met Duke. Now here, Poverty Law Center, close ties, notorious anti-Semite. I wonder what Gary Goldman says about that, who's been with me all over the world and is one of our spike instructors that'll be with you tomorrow. But it shows you the attitude here. And then, by the way, I never met Duke again. I just said no. A week later, because they said, Bo, please, before you run out on us, just give it some thought. You won't have to do anything, but don't come off of the ticket because it'll really make us look unorganized. And a week later, I said, nope, I've thought about it, and the answer is no. I will not appear on the ticket with David Duke. And so I didn't. But the media will not say that, will they? And they write it in this kind of a letter, and I believe it's libelous and it's certainly slanderous. Now, it says in the, I wanted to show you, if I can find it real quick, here it is. I've shown you this before, but I want to show you how blatant it is. Here are two news studies. All of these things came out at the same time. The Poverty Law Center came out in October of 94. The ADL report, Armed and Dangerous, came out October of 94. These came out in October of 94. This says racism takes on a new face. It's talking about the militia of Montana. It says that the militia of Montana up there teach that Jewish people should be exterminated because they are children of Satan. And it says that racist and religious right are getting poised to destroy all families of disbelievers and those not born white. Now, this is very strong language to be printed in newspapers across America, isn't it? This is an AP release. Nobody ever listens to the UPI, but everybody used to give credibility to AP. Used to. Now, you know who said this? They actually give attribution. A man by the name of Floyd Cochran. So I called. I never had heard of John Trockman before. But I called him. I said, John, I've read this thing in the newspaper. You guys, if you are in charge of a Montana militia where you have thousands of citizens involved, and this is your ideology, I want an explanation, friend. I've got a lot of people that are our spikers that I respect and love that live in Montana. And he said, Bo, this is not me. It's not me any more than what they're saying is true about you. And I said, well, who is this guy? Cochran. He said, you mean Cockroach Cochran? He says, call him and find out for yourself. So I did. Cochran said when I first confronted him, yes, I wrote the article, and yes, AP did release it, and yes, I'm willing to come. There are 3,500 groups nationwide that are classified as white supremacist, and then he designates them. The white supremacist groups fall into three categories: constitutionalists, Christians, and patriots. How many of you are a triple threat here? You're probably, thank you, you're probably being counted 3 times. Now, with this kind of stuff in the newspapers, I don't want to lose my line of thought because I'm going to show you why, and if you'll watch it carefully in the news, no matter what, like Lee Harvey Oswald, before we had Rubenstein shoot and kill him. See, what would we have determined if he had actually been brought to trial? Before events may eclipse what is going to happen in the future with this Oklahoma City bombing, I want you to just think about Operation Cable Splice. They have laid the groundwork for hatred and bigotry and bias to be heaped upon anyone who is a Christian, a patriot, or a constitutionalist, because we're all white supremacists. I would imagine a lot of black people and brown people and yellow people and red people would be very angry because maybe they're Christians, patriots, and constitutionalists, regardless of your religion. You might just believe in the Constitution. You might just be a patriot. I found out something, friends, and that's why it makes me angry, but I've almost gotten bulletproof over it when I'm called a racist and bigoted and biased. I've been in battle. We never even thought about what the color of our comrade was. His blood was red, and his bravery was the color that we look for, his fidelity. How good was he? You read the book that I wrote. When I wrote that book in 1992, I had absolutely, well, first of all, I hadn't run for president completely at that time. Actually, I wrote the book in 91. It didn't make its distribution until 92. So the time I was writing it was 91. I had never been called a white supremacist. I'd never been called an anti-Semite before. That didn't come until I got into the arena. But all of a sudden, if you'll read those stories, you'll see my most beloved brothers in there are Oriental people. Lo Therafont is one of the most righteous men whose feet may have never touched the ground. He might have been an angel from God as far as I'm concerned. And you ask Scott David Weekly, and you ask Gary Goldman, and they'll tell you the very same thing. That man was a living saint when we were searching for prisoners of war behind communist lines. And Bob Cole, you read in my book, and you'll see one story after another. Here's a black sergeant first class that is, again, one of my closest brothers. So I found that once I got into the presidential arena, then it was all right to call you anything, whether it had any kind of truth or not. But my point is, here's the ADL document. They have made it stick in the media. They have prepared the nation. Now, what do you need? Because we've got these splinter groups, these agitator groups, writing to Janet Reno complaining about militia. And we've got the media that is pumping it up. What do they need? They need an explosion, don't they? They need something to move this thing along. Now then, let's just drop back and take a couple of examples. How many of you here, I don't want to ask you that question, it'd be embarrassing, but let me give you the answer. As a substitute high school teacher, I love to teach government and history, and in November, when I'm a teacher in the high schools, I will replay a lot of the Kennedy information, and then I'll take the whole week to do it. And at one time, I was teaching 5 classes in high school in Las Vegas, senior classes in government, and on Thursday, I gave them all a little composition. I said, I want you to write me and turn it in tomorrow, who killed JFK and why? Do you know that there was not a single child, not the dullest, not the brightest, that handed in a paper that said JFK was killed by Lee Harvey Oswald, a lone assassin in Dallas, Texas? So if you cannot fool high school students, many of them who cannot read their diploma, I wouldn't expect you to be fooled. Who do you think might have been behind the Kennedy killings? If you read my book, you will know I give you 8 reasons there. Kennedy was doing what? Remember what Eisenhower warned us about? Watch out for the military-industrial complex. They've got trillions of dollars they're grinding out. They don't want to stop, do they? What did Kennedy say he was going to do about Vietnam? He was going to pull us out. And then what did good old LBJ do as soon as Kennedy was out? We had 500,000 soldiers in Vietnam in less than a year. And what was Kennedy doing about Cuba? He was getting sweet on Castro, wasn't he? He wanted a space race, not an arms race. A lot of people didn't like that. What about organized crime? They started indicting 10-to-1 ratio. Friends, there's about, I can go on and list 8 or 10 reasons why they killed Kennedy. Who's they? The they that killed Kennedy is a shooter team that almost anyone